I think one of the main things that stands out for me is the incredible outpouring of compassion for Paris, her citizens and the churches of Paris at that time. It was quite extraordinary, because we know that the world's attention was focused on Paris. But as a church, we at St Michael's felt so encouraged and humbled by the hundreds of messages we had of solidarity and support and prayer. And it was an amazing thing to lead worship on the Sunday that followed the Friday, and to know that we had never been as prayed for as at that time, that there would be hundreds of people. For me personally, that was extraordinary, to stand and lead worship and know that I was being prayed for in that way.
It happened in Holy Week. So we were just about to welcome people from all over the diocese for a Chrism Eucharist in Holy Trinity. And we were suddenly aware that people weren't going to make it, and people were going to be turned back from airports and stations all over Europe and in fact over the world. And as Holy Week developed, we were very aware of as Alison said, the support of Christians in Europe and throughout the world, but also the particular resonances of the suffering of the city with the events of Holy Week. There was a real sense of something terrible has happened in the midst of us, and yet Christ is risen. So the Easter greeting was a very, very powerful moment in our main service at 10:30. Yeah.
Now in Paris, I guess that being on high security alert has become the new normal. People are moving around, accustomed to having bags searched, jackets opened when you go to the cinema or the theatre, accustomed to the riot squad police being on every corner. But there's also a difficult sense that the waters have closed over the events of November the 13th of last year. And I think that we as a church are conscious of the need to carry on praying for those who are still very much maimed emotionally and physically by the events, our families, hundreds and hundreds who are suffering.
On one level, we're kind of getting back to normal. The metro has just started running, and even the station in which the bomb went off reopened on Monday. But we still have the military on the streets. The military is still on the streets, and we find that people are jumpy when they hear a helicopter going overhead or a siren in the streets. There are groups of people trying to work together to rebuild community, and that's a very good positive sign at the moment. And people are not, on the whole, casting blame as they were in the earlier stages after the terrorist attacks.
I think the danger for us personally as a church, St Michael's in Paris, and perhaps for every church in every city, in every part of the world, is complacency, is perhaps a sense that this can't happen here or won't happen here. When November the 13th happened in Paris, we were stunned that it had happened again after January and Charlie Hebdo in Paris. Now I think we'd be crazy to imagine that it won't happen again, and we must be armed and prepared for that, armed in the sense of prayer, which is our only weapon, and confidence instead of complacency, confidence in the amazing gospel that we have to proclaim, a belief that we are a church for such a time as this, for this particular period in history. I believe for us as a church in Paris, that means that we have to be armed with information about what's happening in the world, that we have to really engage, to have to be churches that really do preach the gospel with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in another, or reliable sources of information about what's happening in the world and how we can pray into these situations. I believe we need to give thanks as well, because we believe that we've been protected, that attacks have been thwarted.
Both Holy Trinity Brussels and St Michael's Paris are, in a sense, microcosms of the Anglican Communion. We have people from all over the world, many of whom have suffered far greater horrors than we have suffered in Paris and in Brussels. Our congregation has many people from Rwanda and Burundi, and I think we perhaps share in a tiny way through what we've experienced what our brothers and sisters throughout the world are experiencing on a daily basis. And it humbles me to think that I have experienced it in such a tiny way and learnt what it means to carry on in faith and in trusting God in the midst of all that.